ecology of the Garrett Family Preserve at Cape Island Creek. And I'm going to turn it over to them.
Hello, thanks for coming and thanks for listening today. We're going to talk about the Garrett Family Preserve at Cape Island Creek today. I'm a stewardship manager for the Nature Conservancy in New Jersey, and I've had the wonderful privilege of managing and creating much of what you see or are going to see today. If you've been to the Garrett Family Preserve, you'll recognize some of this. It's been just a great opportunity. One of my favorite things of all being here, two things. One, being outside a lot and in nature, but three, being given essentially a blank slate at an amazing property and just being, given years of support and resources to come up with, what do you do at this site? There's lots you can do. Do you want high visitation? Do you want secret spots? There's so many neat things you can do. And the Garrett Family Preserve has a little bit of all of that. So just like I say, it's been great work. It's a continuing work in progress, of course. So we'll move right forward here. So the location, this is the very bottom of the state of New Jersey, absolute bottom. There's Sunset Boulevard, you can see where my mouse is moving here. Down the lighthouse down here, the concrete ship out in the water, and this big green chunk, well, half of it is our South Cape May Meadows Preserve, if you've ever been down there. If you haven't, check it out. If you like birds, you'll be blown away. It's an amazing, amazing destination. Garrett Family Preserve up by this red circle here. Not nearly as old as and established as the Meadows, but it's really coming along in its own right. So they're near each other. Within 5 minutes, you can pop back and forth between them. And of course, just down here are all the Victorian homes and all the cool shops and the stuff people enjoy. That brings a lot of tourism to these places. And of course brings visitation to our preserve as well. So it's kind of, it's a unique partnership. Our preserves, like the South Cape May Meadows, brings roughly 90,000 people a year. Garrett, not quite that, but it's also a lot newer. What this does, this helps tourism immensely. What I'm getting at is natural places can help the economy in the local place. Brings people from all over the world to come and look at these places. Therefore, while they're there, they explore the rest of Cape May. So there's obviously lots of benefits to having these places. Just a very broad overview. The preserve's open dawn to dusk. It has a regular established parking lot. Bikes are welcome. It's becoming, it's flat, but it's becoming more popular. It's a very easy ride. There's lots of those kind of cruiser bikes that people bring out and cruise along the trails. And, the trails are wide. They're not like these little skinny things. You could even get two bikes side by side on some of them. Very pleasant to ride a bike through. We have wildflower fields, and you're going to see more of this in detail as we go along. Marsh and forest. A little over 4 miles of trails. And it's a super birding hotspot. I'll cover some of that in just a minute. Going back, the historical use, on the left there, 1995, this was agriculture. There were gladiolas in here. There was lima beans planted in here. There was even some salt hay that was going along the out in this marsh here. There's a very unique marsh. You were able to walk out into it. If you think of a South Jersey salt marsh, you think, oh, I'm going to step in here, go up to my neck in mud. This is like walking on the ground, like almost not pavement, but it's unique. It's very tough and stable ground down here. But they used to do salt haying way back in the day out here. But you can see it's just completely open. Now you fast forward to a year ago, and you can see what's happened here. There's some natural recruitment, but what we did is we planted thousands of trees in here. And I'll get into the reason why we did that in a moment. But you can see the stark difference. Some of this is just natural recruitment, like I was saying. It will just, there is no such thing as a field in southern New Jersey. If you let it go, 5-10 years, you can have a successional forest. It's just the way it is around here, which is beneficial if you're trying to grow native stuff. So some of it's recruitment, but like I said, we planted lots and lots of trees. So that's it from a satellite view, historically and now. There was, before TNC got it, pretty ugly plans for a development. And of course, it was going to be called Egret's Walk. If you take a sharp eye at the names of many of these developments, it appears to me whatever you seem to eradicate from the area is what you name the development. Maybe it's just me, but it seems that way. So there was 24 units in a subdivision right in the preserve. I mean, permits were had. You can see some of these even say sold on them. They were already taken or called for. Somewhere along the line, there was some issues with permits, and I won't go into all the boring details, but the benefit was TNC was able to come in and purchase it outright before this was developed. The acquisitions, there was 3. Here's the preserve, the part we were just looking at that I said had the gladiolas and farming in it here. This was the second piece that was purchased. The first one is out here, mainly salt marsh. But it's good to protect the salt marsh too. You may think you can't develop in a wetland, but look around. People do it all the time. But this is protected now. And everything that the Nature Conservancy purchases, buys, and protects is protected forever. Even if we transfer it to the state, some other like entity, they come with easements on them, conservation easements, you cannot develop them. So this was the first part that was protected. Second part is inside here. This is where all the trails are. And with partial funding from the Garrett family, we got this nice buffer over here. Believe it or not, they try to develop everything around here. There's not much space left in Cape May. So there's a nice little buffer here as well. That is the history of the acquisitions. And it was established formally in 1999. Quite a bit ago. So why is it called the Garrett Family Preserve? Well, James Garrett, let me move this here. Artist James Garrett, he drew upon this Cape May seascape as a basis for his sketches and as an illustrator for a Philadelphia newspaper. You can see some of these really cool illustrations here. And we have some of this on our signage. We have various interpretive signs, some informational kiosk type signs at the preserve. And we've chosen to put James Garrett's sketches in there, which is pretty cool. For decades, James brought his family, including his wife Frances and children, Jim, Jack, and Bob, each summer to vacation in Cape May. Who wouldn't like to do that? To play in the salty air, swim in the Atlantic, all the wonderful things that you can do down here. Probably paddle Cape Island Creek right behind the preserve. I believe this is, if you look across where my mouse is on the right side of the slide, over there is the Garrett Family Preserve. I think if you look the right way, you can still see this spot from the preserve. And so this is where they were. He was a Philadelphia school teacher, Jim Garrett, a Philadelphia school teacher and Nature Conservancy supporter, inherited James, his father's appreciation of Cape May, as well as his large collection of illustrations. When Jim passed in 2010, he left a wonderful and generous bequest to the Nature Conservancy. His brother Jack, sister-in-law Betty Lou, and niece Pam Cannell consulted with TNC, the Nature Conservancy, to determine, the right way to honor his memory. And, since they had been around this area for so long, they found it in Cape Island Creek. It's an area just across the creek, like I was saying, from their cottage, where they spent so many wonderful summers together. So in 2014, the preserve was renamed the Garrett Family Preserve at Cape Island Creek. So what this means is this generous bequest, it was a way for the Conservancy to see some of our dreams we had for the preserve. If you just open up a preserve and you want to do all these wonderful things that we're going to show you that we've done so far, none of this is cheap. It's difficult sometimes to get funding for. So they've really, they've really made this place special with this bequest, and we've done the best we can with it, and we're still moving forward with it. So it was renamed in 2014. We had a formal grand opening, which was really cool. The end of October 2016, and several members of the Garrett family were on board, as well as some municipal officials. So there is everybody there. That was so cool when that happened. Okay, so we do have a special treat for you. Jack Garrett is here, and he's going to share his thoughts about this. Hey, Jack.
Damon, thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I gotta say, I'm a little choked up at this point. Those pictures bring back some really fond memories. My father was in love with Victorian architecture. So in a way, it was inevitable that we'd wind up in Cape May. There wasn't much of a budget, but my dad saw this place in Cape May, that the pictures we just saw. It was an unfinished bungalow that was literally 4 walls, the roof, and the floor. And my father undertook to make that shell into our summer home. It took him years to do it, and he had help along the way. In fact, we all helped when we got around to it. I was 8 years old in 1944 when we took possession of the building. My brother Bob, my younger brother Bob, was 6. Jim had just turned 14. And in the beginning, we stayed in cabins because obviously there were no amenities in the house. And we stayed in cabins for the rest of the summer of 44 and into 45. But then after that, we began to live because my dad managed to get plumbing into the house, electricity. He literally was his own carpenter, plumber, landscaper, whatever he needed to do. You know, he knew where to get the help, and it got done. So that I guess after about 5 years, the place was just livable. And we as kids got a full summer every year until we were to our adulthood, getting the best out of what Cape May offers. Now, in 1944, Cape May was a very different place from what it is now. It was at the end of the peninsula. There was no Garden State Parkway, no Atlantic City Expressway, and it was a long haul to get down there. But there is a unique feature about Cape May, and that's that Victorian architecture that sets it apart from everything else on the Jersey Shore. I would equate it with a trip to Charleston or Savannah. It has something unique about it in that Victorian architecture, which has been preserved and expanded, and it's a delightful place. As far as working with TNC, I can't say enough. It's been a wonderful experience. All of our desires, all of our wishes with respect to the preserve were just, there's no problem. We just were given every opportunity, and I love what's been done. It's a great thing. One of the things we wanted most of all was to make an addition to the many sites that are available in Cape May, and I think that's been done. So congratulations, Nature Conservancy. You've done a wonderful job. You're a great bunch of professionals. And as I said earlier, when we were off camera, you don't go to TNC for a job. You go there, it's a vocation. Everybody is so dedicated. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. That was amazing and awesome. Really appreciate that. Heartfelt words there. We feel the same way on this side. As we get into the preserve, show you some of the habitats, the species and habitats. If you can picture an hourglass, 1,000 miles long, let's say, and in the center of it, it's pinched, right? That pinch, and let's say that it's full of birds flying up and down, depending on the season. That pinch happens right here. It happens in Cape May, partly because of the bay, partly because of other reasons. But it's world renowned for birds. So if you have great habitat, you're just going to have an incredible amount of birds as well. They literally funnel through there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. It's called the Atlantic Flyway. It's, like I said, world renowned. There's nothing like it. If you come at the right time, the birds are just dripping out of the trees. We even have something called the World Series of Birding, where people come from all over the globe to see how many birds they can see in 24 hours. We don't have it, so it's on Audubon, but it's on our preserve, certainly. If you were to look at the Garrett Family Preserve, which we're talking about now, we have quite a variety of habitats. In 2015, there was 219 bird species identified. In 5 years, and I think it's partly because of visitation has gone up, there's already 30 more species of birds, which is a lot for individual different species. But what we did at the Garrett Family Preserve, we took these larger open areas and we planted islands of trees. And every single tree we planted, we made sure that at some stage in its life, it would grow lipid-rich berries and fruits. And these are fruits and berries that have fats in them. And many of them have longer term fats. And birds eat them. So the migrating birds, especially when they eat these berries that we've planted trees that have them, they can take these berries, the fats go in their muscles and tissues, and it stays a lot longer. It burns for a longer time. So these little birds that are flying 1,000 miles or something crazy like that, and there's lots of them that do amazing migrations, they need this. So they come through the funnel, go into South America, let's say, they hit the Garrett Family Preserve, there's berries all over the place, they tear up the berries, and now they have the energy to make their trip. Not all shrubs and trees have the right berries. Some have berries that I equate to monster drinks. Lots of energy, but it's gone in an hour. You know, it goes quickly. But we specifically planted the habitat with these migrating birds in mind. It will, of course, also help the birds that are just breeding there during the summer and so forth. But looking at the picture, we just have, there's a tree line that surrounds the preserve. There's a couple interior ones. The shrubs themselves, as we manage this, I tried to manage it for early to mid successional, and that just means, you know, trees below 10 feet or 15 feet. I didn't really think of it becoming a forest. We kind of lose that. But what we found over the years is some of these trees take longer to produce berries than I was expecting. So it has started to grow up a little bit higher than I originally thought it was going to. But it's turning out that the birders in Cape May, there's people that live in Cape May that bird all the time, and they're, you know, some of the best in the world. They have said the numbers, and just like I said, have gone up 219 to 249, and they keep going up. And I think it's because the place is starting to mature. So I would think, you know, another 5 years from now, and it's going to be just like a super hot spot for birds. Every year they just go up and up and up. So it's really cool to be able to have this plan and follow it through and see it affecting the birds like it is. And, you know, it's kind of it's one of the things we stress the most in Cape May because of all those reasons, and it's working. It's literally working. So that's kind of cool with that habitat, these habitats that we're making. And we'll talk about a couple of them a little more specifically in a bit. We have wildflowers. We decided to plant 4 acres of wildflowers. Probably 80% of them are native. Some are naturalized. Some are not native, but they're non-invasive. Those don't last too long anyways, but it's all for different pollinators. And we'll talk about pollinators and flowers more than once because it is pretty important. Pollinators, you can look up something, you know, like plight of the pollinators. It's something, pollinators are just things that need, they go back and forth to different plants and spread pollen, help the plants grow, help the plants reproduce. At the same time, a lot of these get nectar. You'll see hummingbirds on here. Pollinators are not just insects. Turns out lots of different things go into plants. Ants, there's loads of different stuff. If you go to the Garrett Family Preserve, about a month ago, the mimosas are blooming. Now, mimosa is not a native tree, but I can keep it in check because I manage the place. But when it does, when they get larger, they're huge. Just think of those like those nature programs we see in African savanna, and you see this tree in a distance. It's got this big umbel on the top. You know, that's a cool looking tree. The mimosas are similar, but the entire umbel is pink. And I saw 18 red-throated hummingbirds on one of these trees once. So, you know, all of these things are pretty amazing if you watch them. Not all things that are non-native are bad. Keep in mind, if something is not a native species, unless it's really, really critical, you do something immediately. Just take the time to see what it does. You need to know what its behavior is before you immediately eradicate it. If I had gotten rid of these mimosas, you know, the hummingbirds wouldn't have it. So if you, it's just an example of just watch your habitat the best you can and manage it for the species. Here's just the beginning of the field. I think this was a year after we planted. You can see there's a lot of grass that was kind of in the mix. Some of these California poppies. This was not in California, obviously. This was the Garrett Family Preserve. But these kind, you know, they only stay a couple years. They add some color for the first year or two. This is the 4-acre field. That's me over there. And we have a salt marsh. Don't forget, more than half of the preserve is salt marsh. And there's that cord grass on the left. This is the stuff that is just, you can walk right across it like you're walking across your lawn. It's super stiff. All kinds of neat snails out there. And you can walk out onto our marsh a little bit without any worry. We don't have a trail out on it or anything, but you can walk right to the edge of it. And you'll see some shorebirds, lots of osprey and egrets and that kind of stuff, just by walking over and looking. It's a really healthy marsh. Goldenrod, if you want to see this for yourself, right now it's blooming. In another few days or a week, it's going to be probably peaked. There are millions of these plants, these flowers in this preserve. It's incredible. You go at the right time and the whole place is just blazing yellow. It's quite amazing to see. It plays a big role in the annual monarch migration as well, which Cape May is a hot spot for. You know, it has a late blooming nectar. It is getting late. It's in September. But it's, yeah, if you come at the right time and you get lucky, sometimes you can see them just dripping with monarchs. So if you can and you're around, next day it's nice out, go out there and walk the Polinator trail, which Lily will be talking about in a bit. Pretty cool. Porcelain berry, I was saying a minute ago, not all non-natives are bad, but some are. Not all of them want to play nice. Porcelain berry, I'm just highlighting because you'll likely see it out there if you go to Cape May, go down Sunset Boulevard, down to the lighthouse and so forth. You'll wonder what this stuff that almost from a distance looks like kudzu. It's just covering everything. It's porcelain berry. Super cool looking, right? Wow, look at that. Terrible for our environment. It's not in the right home. It needs to be somewhere else. It competes voraciously for sunlight and space. I have only seen a couple plants ever that it can even keep up with it. It will outcompete Phragmites. If you know what Phragmites is, your jaw will drop when you hear that. It covers everything. The plant can't photosynthesize, and then porcelain berry wins, and it sits and makes more berries. The other downside is that I've been harping on how many birds we have. Well, birds like porcelain berry, of course. So they gobble up the berries, fly around a preserve, and drop the rest of the berry all over the place. Porcelain berry is like a monster drink. They like it, it gives them energy, but it's not good for their migration. So this is a continuing challenge. It's not all just a bed of roses when you go to manage a place. There might be these invasive species that come in and really challenge you, and this is one of them. It's super challenging because it covers your native vegetation. You can't spray it or you will kill your native stuff too. So ongoing challenge there, but if you see it and you know that it's porcelain berry, I'm not going to complain if you pull a piece of it out. And I'm going to turn some of this over, the next bit, to Lily Mullock.
Okay, thank you, Damon. All right, so now we're just going to go over a few of the features of the preserve. So this is just the overall map. As Damon said, we have just over 4 miles of trails. As you can see, they're going to go through all different kinds of habitat here. This perimeter trail goes through more forested areas. It does back up to the tidal marshes as well. The pollinator field, or the pollinator trail located within the wildflower field that Damon referenced is this red one here. It starts from the parking lot. There's an area that is all milkweed right here, passes the shade structure pavilion, and then goes all the way along to the back tidal marshes. And that's also where you'll see the most of the goldenrod bloom as well. And then we have 4 other trails for totaling, yeah, just over 4 miles. These little triangles here throughout that you'll see, I'll go into more detail a little bit later, but these are actually art easels. The back right corner is where we have our bird blind. And then the arches, which you will see more photos of later on, they are also located on the perimeter trail. That is them over here. So the trails are pretty flat, which is great for, you know, if you have kids or if you want to ride your bike. It's a pretty easy trail. And since there are so many different trails, you can kind of customize how long you want your hike to be. If you want it to be, you know, a quick one, you could just do the perimeter real quick, but you could also easily spend a couple of hours exploring all of the trails. This is just an additional photo of the 4-acre wildflower field that we have. Like I said, this is located along the Pollinator Trail or the Red Trail. And you can kind of see in the background there, that is the shade structure. Just a couple of close-ups of some of the flowers that you may see when you're visiting. Basically, we were keeping our local, our native pollinators in mind when coming up with the idea of the wildflower field. It just helps them with the late nectar bearing plants. So bees, moths, butterflies, any local pollinators that we have, this is great habitat for them. And it does help with overall conservation goals for, you know, these creatures, honeybees, anything that may be experiencing habitat loss. The best time to come see the wildflower field would be typically like mid to late May through July. And then for the goldenrod bloom, the best time to come see that would be late August through about October. So this is a close-up of the shade structure. This is, like I said, located off of the Pollinator Trail. It is a really nice area to sit down and maybe take a break or have a picnic. And there are 3 different picnic tables there. It's nice and shaded. This would also be, you know, maybe a good spot for like a birding group or a field trip, something along those lines. Also located on the Pollinator Trail, we have a, it's actually an insect hotel. And this was done by a local Boy Scout troop as an Eagle Scout project. And the idea behind it is that it provides additional habitat for beneficial insects and pollinators. And what they'll do is they will just lay their eggs in these holes between the bricks and the reeds. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that if this is something that you would want to do at home, because some people do have these little insect hotels in their, you know, gardens, backyards. One really important thing to keep in mind is once a reed has been used, once, you know, the bees have laid their eggs in it, it does need to be replaced at the end of the season. Reason being, if you leave it, there is potential for a fungus that can take out the habitat, and it's really not good for the pollinators. So just keep that in mind, replace them if they are used. So along the back end of the preserve overlooking the tidal marsh is our mobile bird blind. You get some really awesome views of the marsh, the back end of Cape May, and there is also actually a osprey platform. You can kind of see it right here. But if you go out there any given day in the summer, you will see the ospreys out there. You'll also probably see them flying over the preserve. Absolutely beautiful birds. And the bird blind gives you a good, good view of their platform. So these are the arches that I mentioned earlier. There are 4 of them. They are on that perimeter trail. And I think these are just absolutely magical. They are starting to be covered by climbing vines and grapes and things like that. So it's nice and shaded. And when you're walking down this trail, you just feel really surrounded and in nature. It's just quiet. You hear all the birds, and it's really, really beautiful, and it makes for an excellent photo opportunity. So as I said, we have art easels. There are 3 different easels, and they are completely adjustable. So this bar here, it actually can move up or down depending on the size of the canvas that you'd be using. And you can kind of tell here, but the easel is actually on a swivel, so it can turn any way that you want it to face. So 2 of them overlook the tidal marshes. This one overlooks the back right corner of the preserve, kind of looking into Cape May City. There is one on the opposite end of the preserve that's overlooking tidal marshes as if you were leaving Cape May City. And then we have another easel located on the Polinator Trail, and that one overlooks the Wildflower field. So this is kind of like a little hidden gem on the preserve. It is a covered picnic table. It is under a really, really large mulberry tree, and it is also starting to be covered by climbing vines. So it's completely shaded, as you can see in this photo here. It's a really awesome place to sit down and maybe take a break or have a picnic. And actually during the summer, all along here is raspberry bushes. So you can help yourself to a little snack while you're there. So keeping up with kind of the art theme of this preserve, we actually have what we call the Poets Trail. On all along the trail, we have these little plaques, and they have different quotes or poems. Most of them are, either relating to nature or just something really inspiring. And we actually change them out seasonally. So this is something that's not open to the public to, walk up to, but you can see it from the perimeter trail. We actually have beehives on our preserve. We have this for a couple of reasons. One, or mostly just to help further their conservation. These are honeybees, of course. And when we first started out with the hives, we teamed up with a local beekeeper, and he brought out 3 hives, or 3 boxes initially, and they were about 2 to 3 tiers tall each. He came back about a month later to check on their progress, and he was absolutely blown away because the hives were completely full. They were really thriving. So he decided to add a completely new box and to make each box 4 to 5 tiers tall instead of 2 to 3. And again, he came back, checked on them, absolutely thriving, full of honey. Bees were really happy and healthy. So we were very happy about that partnership. We have amazing habitat for these bees to be on, and they pollinate our flowers, so it's kind of a win-win situation. And also throughout the preserve, you do get views of the Cape May Water Tower, which is just kind of something fun to see. If you go to the preserve right now, and all along here is where you're going to see the Goldenrod as well. And it's a really awesome place. If you do have time to pay a visit, I absolutely would. It is far back, it's secluded, you really feel just, one with nature. And we are going to open up to some questions, but first, Damon wants you to see a time-lapse video of the Pollinator Hotel that I mentioned being built. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for you. And if you think of any questions while this is playing, feel free to put them in the chat.
So this is the local troupe building this. It's made out of cedar. Cedar really doesn't like to rot. It's a long time outdoors. White cedar, not red cedar. Red cedar kind of repels insects.
Everyone, if you have questions, we're going to start going through them. You can stick them in the chat box. Okay, Damon, one question just came in. How do you control porcelain berry? Is it manual removal?
Wow, the $1,000,000 question straight off the bat. If I had the perfect answer, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But having said that, there are chemicals, of course, you can use, and they do knock it back, but you have your native stuff underneath it, so it's tough. One thing you can do, if you, for some reason, have the resources to do it, you just take a pair of clippers, clip it by the ground, and you spray about 20% glyphosate on it. Goes down the stalk, down into the roots, and kills it. But it's something like the Garrett Family Preserve. There's millions of plants. So I have some volunteers attempting this, but it's just, gosh, it's such a big thing. You know, it's like climate change. Can I really, myself as an individual, make a difference? You can, but it's going to take a long time. The other possibility, I'll throw this out there. Yes, you could just pull it and break it off. That's fine. In 2 weeks, it'll look just like it was before you pulled it off, unfortunately. It cannot survive under a pH of about 7.8. I think it's doing well because this was a farm at some point here. But if you can manipulate the soil, and you can do that with sulfur, just pelletized sulfur, you can buy it, you know, at Agway or these kinds of places. You can spread that on the soil, lower the pH by a point or two, probably just a point. If you can just get it under about 7.8, porcelain berry won't grow. It just won't grow. But you can imagine that 183 acre site, it's challenging. It's challenging to do. We're doing little experiments here and there, but so just trying, at this point, I'm just trying to keep it at bay. I don't have any grand illusions that I'm going to eradicate it completely. I have these dreams / nightmares, if you could call them, that the spotted lanternfly is going to make it hot and heavy in Cape May. It's a nightmare because the spotted lanternfly damages fruit-bearing vines and stuff. Like, it would tear up all the grapes in the area. But it also might get rid of the porcelain berry. But, you know, we don't want that. I would rather people's vines stay going. But it might show up. It's been found in Cape May. I don't know what's going to happen to it. That's my answer to the porcelain berry.
Okay, I have a few more. What's the story with the old train on the property?
Well, there is, the train used to go off the island. If you go over the bridge or the Cape May Canal, you'll look to your left if you're going south. You'll see out in the water a trestle that is currently not connected, and it will no longer ever be connected again. That connected the railroad, which used to run out of Cape May. To be honest, I don't know where it went eventually. I think it might have gone to Atlantic City. Right now, there is a guy, a little company that runs a miniature kind of trolley on the tracks near the Garrett Preserve. What I'm getting at is, if you go just a quarter mile past the Garrett Family Preserve on those railroad tracks, it will end. You can't get over the canal. So anything that's happening on the tracks is stuck south of that. So we were able to get rid of most of the cars on there. They used to be big, ugly metal cars. They're all gone. They were scrapped. But there's a business that runs a little trolley. You know, I don't know if he's running it now, but he was the past few summers. You would see him go by the entrance of the preserve with like 10 people in it, with a little bell dinging and stuff. And people could ride up and down the tracks and view our preserve in different parts of Cape May. But it's not what everybody would consider an active railroad anymore.
Okay. Do you have any data on the economic impact the pollinators provide to the Cape May community?
I do not. I don't have information on that specifically.
Okay. Next question, a little unrelated, but have the 5 osprey from the South Cape May Meadows gone on their migration to South America?
I would say odds are yes. Every time I say that, one crops up and stands on the platform, but it's been since Monday since I've seen any. This is the longest period of time I can think of where I haven't seen a single bird. I'm guessing they're on their way. I mean, they could be in the trees next to the preserve. We still see osprey at the preserve, bopping around, but I haven't been able to see if they have bands on their legs, if they're one of ours or not. But it's got to be really close. It's got to be really close. We're going to keep the camera going for a while. We're going to add infrared and sound and other stuff. I don't know if we're going to all winter, but it'll be up for a while. I just have, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to move to another question. You can keep going.
I just have final thoughts, so you can go to the next question.
Okay. Is there opportunity for preserve expansion?
There's possibilities. I don't know if I could call it an opportunity or not. Just to the north of our preserve is a pretty large chunk of land. If I had the map, well, you can just look at it on Google Earth, just north of it. It's owned by Jack Sayer, a local school teacher, amazing individual. He's like 97 or something, still bopping around. Super cool guy. He owns all of that. It's undeveloped. It would be amazing to get in our portfolio to add to the Garrett Family Preserve. But, you know, exploring it, but, you know, he's still alive and his son's there, and, you know, we work with him all the time. But that's a patch right next to the preserve. It's the only open patch left. The rest is marsh and over the railroad tracks into the developed area. So that's what's left right there.
Great. Damon and Lily, thank you so much. There's no more questions. Do you guys have anything else?
I just have one last thing. So, and just think about this after the program. So all the things that we talk about, the insects, the osprey, the snails, all of these kinds of things, they all hold their lives to the same tenure that you do yours. They deserve to live. The next time you see a spider in your basement or an ant on your windowsill, just let it be, or take it outside. Is it just enough to survive? I don't think so. I think everything deserves a chance to thrive. And part of what we do at the Nature Conservancy, the Garrett Preserve, for example, is we try our best not to just let nature survive. We try to give it a chance to thrive. So as you walk around the preserve, just keep that in mind. And when you're in nature, just keep it in mind all the time. We all deserve a chance to thrive. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. We'll be sending an email with a recording from today. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks for coming.